What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about how Ukraine is now trying to not rely on the United States for anything. Or, like this title here says, it says How Ukraine Learned to Live Without America. Which, honestly, from our point of view, this kind of sounds like a massive failure for the US. I mean, like, we went from total, complete support for Ukraine to literally kicking Zelensky out of the White House. So, and now Ukraine, it's not even something we even like to talk about here in the US anymore. So, today, I really want to check out this video here by TLDR News and try to understand how Ukraine feels about the United States right now. So, let's take a look.
Last year, one of the biggest issues in European politics was defence and the risks of a US military withdrawal from Ukraine. After
Sure.
temporarily suspending US military aid and intelligence sharing to Ukraine in March of last year, Trump then caused further outrage by inviting Putin for a one-to-one summit in August.
I forgot about all that. I mean, so that, not to be insulting, but so much crazy stuff has happened in the last year. I remember a lot of this Ukraine, Russia stuff happening. Trump kicking Zelensky out of the White House. It was a huge mess. And he also met with Putin. And oh my God, I forgot about all that. Oh my
And then
God.
published a 28-point peace plan in November that was seen as favourable to the Kremlin's demands.
People, what a fail. Oh my God, what a fail. And a lot, I mean, I don't think it's any secret. Like, a lot of this stuff sort of started happening when Donald Trump became president of the United States. He was reelected for the second term. Um, I'm sure Ukraine was not happy to see that. I'm sure a lot of people were not happy to see that. But yeah, like I said, the United States has had a very inconsistent stance on Ukraine. At the beginning, we had sort of an overwhelming support with like financial aid and military packages and all sorts of like amazing stuff. And then when Trump was elected, it completely was flipped over on its head where he's meeting with Putin and drawing up like stupid peace plans that never ever came to fruition.
However, since then, various things seem to have swung the dial in Ukraine's favour. Russia's war economy is struggling, its military advances have stalled, and Ukraine is successfully striking targets deep inside Russia.
It's funny because this is all great news. It's awesome to hear that Ukraine is doing so well, even without the United States help, really. That's awesome. That's good to hear. And strangely, this is like stuff we don't really hear about here in the US. Maybe because we're kind of embarrassed about it. Like, we stopped like giving most of our aid to Ukraine. We stopped helping, and Ukraine is still doing good. So maybe we're like a little embarrassed, or because you really don't hear about this stuff on the news here anymore.
More interestingly, though, Ukraine seems to be quietly and strategically reducing its reliance on the US. This week, for instance, the Financial Times reported that Ukraine has successfully tested a domestic alternative to the US's Patriot missile system.
The Ukraine can manufacture like missiles and stuff like in Ukraine during war. You're manufacturing like building cheap alternative missiles. That's amazing. Obviously, I'm sure the US government hates that because we want you to have to purchase our missiles and rely on us. Oh, the US loves when people has to rely on us. So I'm sure the US government is not happy with this at all. But that's really impressive to me. Like during the war, Ukraine is like manufacturing its own missiles and stuff. Wow.
While Ukraine has also become more diplomatically and economically self sufficient. This all comes amid reports that Trump will scrap security assistance for Ukraine in the US's 2027 defense budget, with
Wow.
one Pentagon official confirming in a Senate hearing on the 30th of April, yes, that is correct. There is no USAI, or Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, funding in this budget.
There's none. Because I know that like there's still some aid being given to Ukraine from the US from older packages and older things that we like from Biden. And so I guess there's a little stuff going on and it's getting less and less, and in 2027 there's just no budget for Ukraine at all. We're just completely done helping. Is that It's what it sounds like.
So, in this video, we'll explain the three main ways Ukraine appears to
Hmm.
be quietly ditching America.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I didn't even realize that we're still because like I said, you never hear about this in the United States anymore. So the reason is I think we're kind of shamefully like just completely pulling out, backing away. I, I don't know. It's weird, like I said, because for so long, so many Americans were so passionate about supporting Ukraine, and then it's like our attention span only lasts for so long. Like Americans didn't expect a war to last more than a month. After a month, it's like a bunch of Americans like took down the Ukraine flags. We're like, okay, we're on to the next thing. Like whatever. Like I don't know. It's like a trend or something. It's really disrespectful in a way.
Description. Let's start with a recap of US military aid to Ukraine. Under former US President Joe Biden, the US became Ukraine's single largest military backer,
Yeah.
committing more than $66.5 billion in security assistance to Ukraine, including defense systems, artillery, armored vehicles, missiles, and ammunition.
Yeah, and it's like it's amazing how drastically we have changed on this. Like maybe we should just consistently be giving like a good amount of aid instead of like a ton at the beginning of the war and then zero at the end, or it's not the end, but as time has gone on it's just less and less and less, when you would actually think Ukraine probably needs just as much aid, if not more, now than in the beginning, now that things have gotten harder and harder as time has gone on. So I don't know. It's like the US is trying to help, kinda. At least we were, but our strategy around it was totally like there was no strategy.
However, between late 2023 and early 2024, Biden's Ukraine aid package was blocked by Senate Republicans, a sign of growing isolationist sentiment spearheaded by Trump, which alerted Ukraine and Europe to the possibility that Trump might withdraw military assistance if elected to the presidency. Indeed, within weeks of returning to office in early 2025, Trump publicly humiliated Zelensky in Washington, D.C.
I don't know if you saw this. This was a this was a shit show. I'm just gonna say like that this was crazy, with Vance and Trump getting mad at Zelensky, basically kicking him out of the White House. This w- uh, s- so many crazy things have happened that like a lot of Americans have forgotten about this.
saying you're not in a good position, you don't have the cards. Trump also falsely claimed that the US had
Of course he's not. What? You don't need to tell him he's not in a good position. He's at war. Ukrainians are dying. Like they know they're not in a no one wants to be in that position. Like, I don't know. It's just like a disrespectful thing to say, to like use the fact that somebody is at war and that their people are dying and using that as leverage. Like, hey, you can't complain. You're like, you're all dying. Like, what? What kind of thing is that to say?
Given more than $300 billion, or around $350 billion, to Ukraine, and temporarily suspended
Oh, and then Trump said, we've given a certain amount of money that's not even true.
military aid and intelligence sharing to Ukraine in March. Throughout the rest of 2020,
Why would we stop? If they're going to block funding to Ukraine, okay, like that's money. Like that's bad enough. But to block the intelligence sharing as well? Like that doesn't cost us anything to share intelligence. That's literally just us saying, "Well, good luck. We're not going to help you at all, even with like giving you intel and data." Which is that's not even money. We're not even willing to do that. At that point, we're hoping Ukraine fails if we're doing that.
the various peace plans drawn up by the Trump administration also seem suspiciously in line with Russia's maximalist war objectives, most notably the handover of all 4 of Ukraine's occupied territories to Russia and the absence of any meaningful US security guarantee.
What the hell was this thing? Donald Trump's brilliant peace plan, which he really thought he was doing something here. He really thought he was doing something. This would get him the Nobel Peace Prize. That's what he hoped. What an embarrassment. The peace plan is literally like Russia's Christmas list of like uh, oh, just give over half of Ukraine to Russia and the war will be over. Isn't that a great deal?
Anyway, as of mid 2026, the tables now seem to have turned. In a CNN
Wow.
interview last month, when asked whether Ukraine does now, quote, have cards in this conflict, Ukraine's ambassador to the US, Olha Stefanishna, said, "We printed them. We might have shortages and access to good cards, but we had to print them." Essentially,
Okay.
Stefanishna is alluding to the fact that Ukraine was forced to become more self-sufficient because of Trump's pivot towards Russia, and over the past couple of years, Ukraine has sought other, mainly European, defence partners, like
Well, I think, you know, truthfully, I think a lot of countries, not just Ukraine, but a lot of countries all over the world, for in one way or another, have stopped relying on the United States just because we have become so incredibly, unpredictable. Under Donald Trump, let's just say it. Like nobody can really trust him. No one really knows what he is going to do or say or what he's if he's a trustworthy ally or so I think a lot of countries are starting to not really want to do much business with the US. It's not even just Ukraine.
Germany's Rheinmetall and the Swedish subsidiary of BAE Systems, to diversify its suppliers. On top of this, Ukraine has also massively expanded its domestic weapons manufacturing and development of cutting-edge military tech. This
What?
week, for instance, the FT reported that Ukraine has successfully tested a new surface-to-air missile designed as a cheaper alternative to the US-made Patriot systems.
I'm just so impressed that, like I said, Ukraine during war is managing to manufacture all this military stuff domestically, like in their own country. That's amazing to be able to pull all that off in this kind of time.
Nearly half of which have now been used up against Iran, which would offset the need to import more US weapons. At the same time, several other shifts in early 2026 seem to have tilted the war in Ukraine's favour. Among
Okay.
these was the limiting of access in February to a whitelist of registered Starlink terminals, the satellite communications network owned by Elon Musk, which was being used by both Ukrainian and illegally by Russian military units, which cut off
Oh.
unauthorized Russian access, causing military communication issues and reportedly limiting the effectiveness of Russia's long-range strikes.
Well, thank God. Russia was illegally using Starlink for how long? Why did it take so long to fix that?
As such, the narrative of 2025 that the US was ditching Ukraine now seems to have flipped. In fact, there now seems to be 3 main ways in which Ukraine is quietly ditching America. 1, militarily, 2, diplomatically, and 3, economically. The first way
I I think it's clear that the United States under Donald Trump is trying to ditch Ukraine Like we're literally stopped. Like, well, I think from a lot of things I've heard, a lot of European countries are increasing the aid to Ukraine and like really taking it seriously, while the U.S. like at first we wanted to look real good and we're like, yes, we will help, like, and now we're just like slowly like backing away, like, ah, okay, we don't want any part of it. Like, what? Hey, how do you h- like how do you start in such a positive way with like probably the correct way and then end up to now where we're like kicking out Zelensky, talking to Putin, writing up what he wants for the war to end, and cutting all aid to Ukraine? Like, how did we get from one to the other? I mean, it's literally because the president of the United States was Biden, and now it's Donald Trump. That's really the short explanation.
Ukraine seems to be ditching America is through military self sufficiency. As we mentioned earlier, Ukraine has now successfully tested a new surface to air missile, known as Freya, designed as a cheaper alternative to the US Patriot system, with
Wow.
mass production expected to begin in August and be completed by 2027. As well
Wow.
as cutting edge drones, Ukraine has also managed to mass produce cheap missile interceptors and has sent its expertise in this area to help the Gulf countries in their defense against Iran. Ukraine's
Wow.
military robotics
Ukraine is doing so good with this military technology, it's helping other countries, not just itself. That's unbelievable.
industry has also expanded rapidly, with Ukraine increasingly using robots instead of soldiers in dangerous frontline missions.
Sure,
In fact,
sure.
according to Ukraine's defense ministry, Ukrainian ground robotic systems have carried out 50,000 logistical and medical evacuation missions since the start of 2026.
That's amazing. Obviously, it's kind of scary that now, modern war is like robots and AI, and but that's just the way it's gonna be. So it's good that, Ukraine and hopefully other US allies and like that we are the ones using that technology, not just the bad guys, but it's a scary thought.
This all shows how Ukraine has successfully managed to offset shortages of expensive, mainly American made air defense systems and munitions by strengthening its own, and by extension Europe's, defense industry. The second way
Oh.
Ukraine is ditching the US is diplomatically. Since Trump's return to office, the US has tried to position itself as the principal mediator between Russia and Ukraine, hosting tripartite talks and trying to broker ceasefire deals.
I think a lot of Americans were kind of fooled by this at first, like into thinking, "Oh, Trump is gonna like help negotiate the end of the Ukraine-Russia war. Yeah, he's gonna mediate." And it's like, what a joke! What a joke to ever think that would happen.
However, recently European countries have become more involved in the mediation process, and there's a growing consensus that the EU will need to play a larger role in brokering and upholding any peace settlement. As
Okay.
such, over the past year or so, Ukraine has stepped up its diplomatic engagement with Europe's E3 group, the UK,
Oh,
Germany, and France, which
okay.
also held talks with Russia's deputy foreign minister in Moscow on Thursday. And despite his previous refusal to meet with Putin, Zelensky is now calling for a face to face meeting with Putin to end the war.
Oh,
This
wow.
apparently marks the end of the
Why haven't I heard? Why haven't I heard about any of this? Why do I have to watch a European news channel to get this information? You don't even hear about this in the United States.
US being the sole diplomatic channel, and a shift instead towards a European led diplomatic solution.
Oh, that makes so much more sense. Like, I'm American. I want what's best for us, and I want the US to succeed, but clearly we are not the ones to negotiate the end of this war. So I think it's for the best for Ukraine that like European leaders are working with Ukraine to try to uh, talk about what it would take to end this war, and that makes sense to me because obviously, especially with Trump and the way the U.S. is going, yeah, this is probably for the best, sadly.
Finally, the third way in which Ukraine is quietly ditching America is economically. This is largely via the EU's push for more joint debt. Essentially, as we've explained in previous videos, the EU is becoming increasingly willing to
Mm.
use joint borrowing to fund collective efforts like defence spending, and this offers a larger and more predictable source of funding than that of the US, with its constantly shifting
Oh,
priorities and rising numbers of foreign military interventions.
sure.
Moreover, by aligning itself with the EU's financing initiatives, Ukraine is also taking steps towards closer EU integration, a move welcomed in Brussels, which is, ironically, in large part thanks to Washington.
That just makes sense that if Ukraine is going to go into debt or need money, that it would be from like the EU if they're going to finance any of this stuff and not from the United States just cuz I don't like I said, I think a lot of countries don't want to do much business with the US right now.
When a story like this breaks, the headlines aren't just fast, they're fragmented. Depending on where you get your news, you might.
Oh, is that it? Yeah, okay. That's it. All right. Um this was fascinating. It's tough in a lot of ways to remain objective and because a lot of this is basically saying the United States has failed Ukraine. Ukraine doesn't need the US. Ukraine is doing better without the US in some ways. So it's kind of an embarrassment for us. And I think we kind of botched this whole situation. Like, yeah, from beginning to end, really. And it's something we don't like to talk about. So that's why I wanted to hear like what Ukraine is doing now, what Ukraine thinks of the U.S. and because it's great to hear that it sounds like Ukraine is doing well and things are happening and maybe there's an end in sight and U- Ukraine doesn't need the U.S. That's probably sad for us to hear. Um, but I think it's good to acknowledge all this, especially as Americans, to acknowledge all this so that we can learn from it and not be so stupid about these things. So, for those reasons, I enjoyed this. Anyway, if you enjoyed this, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment with your thoughts on this whole situation, especially if you're European. That'd be very cool to hear about. And if you're interested in more videos like this, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching and see you next time.